Chatting with Isolde lifted Godfrey's heart, but when he closed the laptop and gazed out the window at the dark sky and the glittering buildings, the headless statue stood in the distance, a bitter reminder that refused to fade. Leaning back in his chair, he shut his eyes and slipped into the palace of his soul space. This time he headed straight for the second door, continuing his search for answers. But when he arrived, he froze. The right side of the wall had changed. What was once stone had partially turned into wood. The petrification looked as though it was wearing off. His eyes widened. Mountain's door was already completely wooden, and that was why he could be summoned. If this wall fully transformed, then the second door could be opened. A deep frown formed across his forehead as he thought about what might have caused the shift. Time. No, that didn't feel right. Then it clicked. Mountain had advanced from tear to his eyes, lit up with realization as he studied the wooden section again, his assumption only solidifying. So, making Mountain grow will grant me access to the second Knight Captain. Folding his arms, Godfrey stood in silence, contemplating his next step before finally leaving the soul space. The next morning, a taxi rolled down a sloped street, lined with high-rise apartments, before screeching to a halt. Godfrey climbed out with a backpack slung over his shoulder. He wore strong jeans, a black top, and a dagger strapped to his waist. The blade forged from dungeon beast bones was a tier weapon, capable of slicing through steel with relative ease. That weapon looks dangerous. The shriek made him snap his head left. On the second floor of an apartment, perched on a railing, sat a multilingual parrot. Its beady eyes blinked knowingly at him. A low-tier summon in rank, but infamous for its ability to mimic nearly every language, ancient or modern. Intelligent, but an endless nuisance. Before he could respond, a black and white cat padded up behind the parrot and spat a puff of smoke and flame as though scolding it. Godfrey chuckled quietly. These summons were everywhere. Billions across the globe, rarely exceeding tier and with no growth potential. They were common harmless background noise compared to real threats. Adjusting his grip on the backpack, Godfrey walked on. This district was nothing like his own. The asphalt was cracked and uneven, the air faintly sour with neglect. His eyes locked onto the 10-story building ahead, the one said to house a company that had shut down more than a decade ago. According to reports Head found online, a summoner once lost his beast here. A massive hound had entered the building and never come back. Days later, the summoner's bond was severed completely. Everything about it screamed Green Gate Dungeon. The fact that no guild had touched it only confirmed it wasn't dangerous enough to catch their immediate attention. As he moved closer, he passed a courier hauling a massive refrigerator. Or rather, his summon was the warrior ant, nearly the size of a man, carried the 200-liter appliance. Over 160 pounds, moved as if weightless. Godfrey kept walking. Soon he stood before the looming building itself. Stone-heavy slabs dividing each floor like layered fortifications. Buildings like this weren't built anymore. A strip of yellow tape hung limply across the entrance, torn in two. Someone had gone inside. His brow furrowed as his gaze shifted to the nearby street. A vehicle was parked just out of sight. Only one way to know if this is a real dungeon, and if the people in there are summoners. Exhaling, Godfrey pushed the door open. The instant he stepped inside, the world shifted. He was no longer in a dusty apartment block. Instead, he stood in a cavern vast as a football field. Its floor littered with nearly 50 massive cocoons of stone. Each one pulsed faintly with deep blue light, as though something alive slumbered within. Above the cavern's lofty ceiling soared over 100 feet high, riddled with tiny cracks that allowed slivers of sunlight to spill through, pale against the darkness. Godfrey took a step back, but his shoulders hit a wall. He turned no exit. A typical green dungeon. His eyes narrowed when he spotted 3 figures deeper inside. The first was a hulking man with a shaved head, his thick frame radiating menace. He looked like Dale, older, meaner, more dangerous. The second was a slim man wearing a green beanie, his eyes sharp with a shrewd wolfish gleam. The last was a woman. She wore tight leather, every curve outlined, a crimson whip strapped to her waist that matched the fiery color of her hair. The way the 2 men hung around her made it clear, whether through leadership or seduction, she was the one pulling their strings. Godfrey's lips tightened. It didn't matter. Whoever they were already in this dungeon. He summoned Mountain instantly. Normal people didn't just walk into a dungeon. These 3 had come deliberately, and he knew exactly why. The dungeon core. You walked into a green dungeon with a golem knight. Are you a fool or just naive? The hulking man sneered, his deep voice booming across the cavern. Kids these days, Natasha spat, eyes flashing with something personal. They think they're brave, but they just end up dead. THESES. Leave this place, brat, the big man growled, veins bulging along his thick neck. Godfrey tilted his head back toward the wall behind him, then looked at the man again, as if to say, "Can't you see there's no exit?" The unspoken jab only made the brute's face twist with anger, but before he could roar again, the beanie-wearing man unfortunately stepped on a small stone that sank inwards. The cavern shook. A heavy thud echoed like something massive had just dropped from above. Godfrey bolted forward, eyes fixed on the far end of the cavern. Beyond the maze of cocoons lay an open stretch, a set of stairs, and finally, a massive door. Natasha and her men sprinted too, all of them racing for the same goal. The cocoons began to pulse brighter, their rocky shells cracking, pieces falling away. One burst open beside Godfrey, unleashing a towering werewolf, 7 feet, of black fur and raw muscle. Its snout jutted forward, teeth like daggers, claws 4 inches long. Its inverted legs coiled with explosive strength as it lunged. But Mountain was faster. He moved to Godfrey's left, slamming his great oval shield into the beast. The werewolf was hurled sideways, its body crashing into the floor. Mountain stomped after it without hesitation, his ironclad boot crushing its skull into blood and pulp. Natasha's eyes widened. "That's a golem." Shock flickered across her face, but she quickly snapped a look at her men. Godfrey was gaining ground too quickly. Now she barked. The brute summoned a massive hound like a Rottweiler on steroids. Muscles rippled under its hide, its shoulders towering 6 feet high. The beanie-wearing man responded with a black direwolf, leaner, built for speed, its sharp eyes fixed on Godfrey. The trio turned back toward the huge door, shoving it open as their beasts tore across the cavern floor, straight toward him. Godfrey used Echo, and Mountain's longsword appeared in his hand. In the same breath he used exchange. Mountain appeared in his spot and charged at the giant dog and the direwolf, barreling through them like a tank. While the lightweight effect made Mountain move as if he wore no armor, others certainly felt the burnt of his weight, and naturally the canines couldn't even slow him down. Mountain increased his speed as Natasha and her goons had almost sealed the door shut. Leaning forward, with his great shield raised high, Mountain slammed into the door, like a speeding train hitting a wall. The double panels flung inward with a thunderous crash. Natasha's men were hurled aside, while Natasha herself, who hadn't touched the door, staggered back. Mountain towered over her, broad and menacing, his golden armor, already tainted with blood. The sound of metal struck her ear as he took bold steps forward, while she swiftly created a safe distance between them. Meanwhile, Godfrey's heart thundered harder than it ever had before. As he sprinted toward the door, nearly 50 werewolves thundered behind him. One lunged from above. He spun, slicing off its arm before the claws could rip into his back. But that left him open. 2 more closed in much faster than the first. Godfrey spun the longsword in a full arc, carving through their chests, then used the momentum of the blade's weight to hurl himself forward. Yet before he could land properly, a wolf crashed onto him, teeth snapping. His eyes widened. He could hear the horde gaining ground. He was going to die. Was this it? No. His longsword was useless at this range, and his left forearm was already being bitten into, but he covered it with an Echo gauntlet and vambraces. Die! Godfrey roared, slamming his right fist with such force into the werewolf's snout that its head snapped violently to the side. Stunned, it refused to release him. Snarling back, Godfrey seized its head with both hands and snapped its neck. He tore himself free, stomped another werewolf in the chest to knock it back, then bolted up the staircase. Grabbing a spear from a skeleton along the way, he rushed inside just as Mountain slammed the door shut and jammed it with the spear. Not even a heartbeat later, the door shook violently as dozens of werewolves crashed against it. Their howls pierced his ears. Had they been a fraction of a second slower, he would have been torn apart. The risk of entering a dungeon was real. Mate meant a true death. Wow. I've never seen a humanoid summon that good, Natasha said, with a smirk, as if she hadn't just tried to orchestrate his death. You're a good summoner. Maybe someday you can join my group. Her nonchalant, dismissive tone toward her own treachery twisted Godfrey's expression into disgust and searing fury. His jaw clenched. Brat, no hard feel. The big man didn't finish. Mountain moved before anyone expected it, even Godfrey. A flash of steel and the giant dog's head rolled across the ancient floor, blood spraying as its body collapsed. The big man's mouth bulged. Blood erupted from it. His eyes rolled white before he collapsed, face first, dust rising around his body. Summoner and summoned down in a blink, one dead, the other unconscious. You don't have to give the order, Prince Godfrey. Mountain's voice rumbled hoarse and dark, as if imbued with thunder. Everyone could tell. He forced himself to speak, judging from the rage laced in his tone. The sound froze everyone, even Godfrey. The direwolf lunged at him, but Mountain raised his shield, flinging the beast back against the door. He hurled his longsword after it, with enough force to pierce straight through the thick wood, the blade jutting out the other side. The beanie man swapped places with his wolf at the last second, narrowly dodging death. The direwolf lunged again, sinking its jaws into Mountain's right vambrace. The knight captain lifted the beast overhead and slammed it into the stone with such force that the cavern trembled. The wolf whined pitifully before Mountain snapped its neck. The beanie man lunged at Godfrey with 2 daggers, malice gleaming in his eyes. He had realized the truth. Godfrey was the weak link. If he fell, they might survive. He closed the gap in a blur only to freeze. Blood spurted from his lips as his body shuddered, then collapsed right before Godfrey. Godfrey barely had time to breathe when instinct screamed at him. He leaned hard to the side as a huge tongue lashed past him like a whip. Whipping around, he saw it a 4-foot-tall dark green frog with a pale underbelly. Its tongue snapped out again, impossibly fast. Godfrey couldn't dodge this one, but Mountain stood before him. The tongue struck his armor, splattering saliva. Natasha's eyes narrowed. This brat. Mountain's gauntlet closed around the tongue. With a roar, he yanked the frog off the ground. Midair it bloated, grotesquely swelling into an 8-foot sphere. It smashed Mountain into the ground with an impact that shook the cavern. Dust and rock rained from above. The swollen beast bounced, dragging Mountain with its tongue, and hurled him into the wall with such speed the collision echoed before Godfrey could react. That was a bloating, venomous frog, tier 45, an elite 35 beast with the potential to reach 50. I never knew you had a few tricks up your sleeve. Natasha's whip unfurled slick, with her summons venom glowing faintly as she brandished it. She smiled cruelly. He'll enjoy watching you turn into a ball. Godfrey tightened his grip on the longsword echo-clad armor, enclosing his body. The great helm's slit narrowed his view, but his gaze burned through it. Who said, I have just a few tricks. Mountain's armor turned deep crimson as he entered blackout state, but he wasn't the only one. Godfrey's armor burned crimson as well, his white sclera bleeding into black pupils, glowing a dark, furious red. Strength surged through him, his veins like conduits of bestial blood. The stone beneath his boots imploded as he charged. Natasha snapped her whip down with such force that the very air screamed. If there was one thing Godfrey had learned about his summon, it was that the armor made him a living fortress, a tank with the speed of a destrier. And as he charged, Natasha's whip struck his armor several times. The sharp cracks echoing in the cavern, but it did nothing. Not even a shallow gash. He arrived before her, swinging his sword in a broad horizontal slash. She ducked swiftly, lashing at his foot to trip him to the ground, but yelped the moment her whip struck. His foot felt like a boulder. Godfrey swung his sword backward in a savage arc, forcing Natasha to dodge again. Her whip lashed out once more, this time coiling tightly around the thick chainmail guarding his neck. She yanked with all her strength, the whip tightening like a serpent. With a grunt, Godfrey seized it with his gauntleted hand and pulled. The force was so great Natasha was ripped off her feet, hurtling toward him, roaring. Godfrey swung his longsword backward in a diagonal strike that tore across her body. Blood sprayed against his pauldron and helm, blattering down his cloak as Natasha's body fell limp. Just then, the bloating venomous frog exploded. Mountain had turned the beast's venom against it, yet an even stronger version which it was not immune to, causing the monster to swell beyond its limit and rupture. The detonation shook the ground. Each step Mountain took afterward was like a block of wrought iron being dropped onto stone, his heavy boots pounding with merciless rhythm. The huge knight advanced, lifting his sword and shield, and stood before Godfrey, who remained frozen, staring at Natasha's corpse, standing there, clad in massive armor, broad golden pauldrons, and a regal floating cloak. Godfrey was a sight to behold, a knightly figure, born of myth, but within the confines of his helmet, his own face twisted through a storm of emotions, awe,
fear,
and finally, grim acceptance. He had killed someone, taken a life, something he had never truly imagined doing. Shutting his eyes tight, he let the weight crash over him, his breaths ragged, his body trembling as though his very height had grown heavier under invisible chains. He hadn't meant to kill, But this was the brutal truth of battle within dungeons. Mercy meant death. She had died because if he had hesitated, it would have been him lying lifeless in her place. The victor was always the one who survived, resting his long sword against his pauldron with a soft metallic clink, like a coin dropping onto stone. He turned his helm toward Mountain. "You could speak, and you didn't tell me." Mountain looked at him. For a painfully long second, silence hung in the air. Then, Mia, the towering knight, gave one soft nod. Godfrey exhaled, hot breath rushing against the confines of his helm. With a swivel of his body, he strode into the shadowed depths of the cavernous hall. Mountain followed silently behind, both of them still in blackout state. The transformation drained their mana at a frightening rate. But Godfrey didn't care. He knew he couldn't handle whatever lay beyond without it. Now that Mountain had copied the bloating venomous frog's innate bloating venom ability, perhaps they had a little more hope against what awaited. At the end of the cavernous hall was a ravine. It stretched downward into darkness, a pit of unknown depth. Godfrey narrowed his eyes. He had to clear this dungeon. Go first. Mountain nodded and leapt. His massive form plummeted with a heavy crash, his armor groaning as he rose. At once, a werewolf lunged out of the shadows. But this one was different. Rotting flesh clung loosely to its body, and half its face was stripped down to exposed skull. An undead werewolf. Mountain met it with a shield strike that slammed the beast into the cavern wall. Its decayed body swelled grotesquely before bursting apart into limbs and blood. Two more came rushing, but Godfrey dove down, his blade skewering one clean through the head as he landed. Mountain deflected the second, its claws scraping furiously at his shield, until its arm swelled and fell limp. With a brutal thrust, he drove his sword through its chest. Together they pressed forward. Mountain, charging with shield, raised high. Any undead werewolf that came within reach fell in a strike or two, a feat impossible for him in his normal state. Godfrey's task was to finish what Mountain left crippled, but not slain, after more than 20 kills. They stumbled into an underground circular hall. 6 towering pillars ringed the space, and in its center, a crimson core pulsed atop a small stone platform. Above, the ceiling shimmered like a sheet of crystal-clear water, suspended in mid-air. It somehow remained unfallen, glowing faintly and casting the only light, a phantom moon that illuminated the shadows. As Mountain advanced, something darted from behind a pillar, a black blur that smashed into his shield with colossal force, driving him backward. The blur twisted and slashed toward Godfrey, who raised his blade but was sent crashing into a pillar, revealed in the crimson glow. The blur was a towering werewolf. Unlike the others, it stood fully upright on 2 legs, its massive chest and arms bulging with muscle, long lupine ears twitching, yellowed fangs bared, and claws black as obsidian. The werewolf king. Mountain roared and slammed it against the wall, debris raining down from the ceiling. He swung in retaliation, but his blade cut only shallowly. The beast retaliated, its claws raking across his helm and leaving 3 jagged gashes before hurling him into a pillar. The stone cracked like spiderwebs before collapsing. Godfrey charged, gathering momentum, but the beast's palm swung with terrifying speed. He activated exchange, switching places with Mountain. The knight blocked the blow, while Godfrey slashed from the other side. His sword bit into the werewolf's arm, breaking skin but halting against muscles so dense they felt like steel cords. Not even the venom of the bloating frog worked. The werewolf king had speed, power, and a natural defense far beyond anything they had faced. This wasn't a skill. It was raw, natural construction, something Mountain could never copy. Godfrey's eyes shrank in dread as he retreated, but the beast was faster. Its massive foot slammed into his cuirass, the impact hurling him through a pillar. His armor saved his life. Without it, he would have been crushed. "Come to me," Mountain roared. His voice scraped the air, forced from his throat like jagged steel grinding over stone. The werewolf king halted, tilting its head curiously at the knight who, by all rights, could not wound it. Mountain charged, expecting the usual shield bash. The beast swung, but Mountain ducked, his blade glowing. For the first time, he unleashed a strike not of steel, but of mana. A beam of light erupted upward, tearing into the werewolf king, cutting deep, almost cleaving its body in 2. Godfrey squinted, stunned. An adaptive skill. A skill not born, but created to overcome weakness. His armor crumbled as his mana was spent. On the floor, he stared at Mountain, battered and dented. yet unbroken. Prince Godfrey, Mountain rasped, kneeling on one knee. If it hurts to speak, then don't, Godfrey answered, realizing how much strain it caused him. Go, take the core. Mountain nodded, stepped forward, and grasped the crimson core. Mana coursed through his body in glowing streams. His frame grew slightly, taller, broader, and heavier. Godfrey blinked as the tablet updated, his lips curling. Knight Captain of the Golden Order. Type Hybrid. Tier 34. Potential. 60. Mountain had reached the pinnacle of the low tier in only days. 3 weeks later, Godfrey stepped once again into the hallway of Manhattan High School, a bag slung casually over his shoulder the moment he appeared. The hallway, crowded with freshmen and sophomores, fell into silence. It's him, the hero's son. He's back. Why is he here? I thought he ran with his tail between his legs after realizing Manhattan wasn't for him. Something's changed. Look at his eyes. You're right. Godfrey's gaze locked onto Snow, who leaned against the wall. A beautiful first-year shyly stood before him with a present in her hands, while his cronies, lingered like bodyguards. The conversation had clearly been about Snow and the bold freshman. But the instant Godfrey entered, everything shifted. Snow raised an eyebrow, his smile as sharp as it was radiant. How's your head? Siegfried hit it really hard. I hope it's okay. His angelic grin was like an arrow, piercing straight through the hearts of every girl watching. They maintained eye contact for a while before Godfrey shrugged. It's fine, he said, almost walking past them when Siegfried grabbed him. His skin hardened, transforming into green jade, and he slammed Godfrey against the wall. A malicious grin spread across his face as he leaned close. I'm not done with you. You'll pay for that punch. Godfrey raised an eyebrow, recalling the cafeteria fight where Eselde had helped him nullify Siegfried's connection to his summon. Siegfried chuckled softly, towering over him with his lean, wolfish physique. His dark blue school jacket stretched tight across his muscles. Where's your pretty knight? I'd love to see him. Save your pitiful. Get off. Godfrey's cold reply made Maldred, standing behind Siegfried, with his hands buried in his pockets, chuckle. A vein popped on Siegfried's temple. Godfrey grabbed his arm and wrenched it off, shocking Siegfried. He was about to clench his fist when a sharp sting ran up his wrist where Godfrey held. Then their eyes met again. Siegfried froze. His bravado faltered. Godfrey's gaze wasn't the same as before. It was predatory sharp, the eyes of someone who had killed and survived battles where death lingered close. Just where had Godfrey been for the past 3 weeks? As he turned to walk away, Maldred lunged, only to be halted by Snow's command. Let him go. Fights should wait for the competition in a few days. Snow's narrowed eyes followed Godfrey's departing figure. We'll have the opportunity to teach some people their places. His lips curled faintly. He already sensed the change in Godfrey. Clearly the boy had entered a dungeon. But it didn't matter, the disparity between their summons was too great. And in a few days, once the competition began, Godfrey would learn the harsh truth that talent and hard work weren't equal. Hard work, adored by the weak, only sharpened the advantage of the strong. Why did you leave him? Maldred scoffed. Siegfried shoved him aside, glaring at Godfrey's back. I'll kill you. The moment Godfrey stepped into the classroom, he spotted Dale sitting on a desk, surrounded by a cluster of boys and girls. Other students kept to themselves, reading, scrolling on their phones, or napping. His eyes passed over them and locked onto the girl he'd been chatting with for the past 3 weeks, Isolde. She leaned against the window frame, earpods in both ears, lost in rhythm as she stared outside. But when Godfrey drew back his chair and sat as if pulled by an invisible thread, she turned. Without thinking, Godfrey expected her beautiful smile to brighten his day, as it always had in their chats. But instead, Isolde frowned. His chest tightened. His heart pounded once loudly. Then, removing her earpods, she rose gracefully, placed one hand on his desk and brushed his blonde hair back with her manicured fingers. Her glossy lips curled into a pout. You got into a fight, didn't you? Your hair's ruffled, hiding those nice blue eyes of yours. When she finished rearranging it, a proud smile lit her porcelain face. There's the pretty face I haven't seen for 3 weeks. Godfrey chuckled. That smile, Dale wanted nothing more than to rip it off his face. His jaw clenched, his expression darkening. Dale's not happy look at his face, some students whispered. Is that surprising? Isolde's the only second year invited into the Nexus Club and crowned queen in her first month. Even the 4th years acknowledge her as Manhattan's greatest talent. She's hot property. Dale's not the only one after her. Even the numbered in the Nexus Club, the top upperclassmen have their eyes on her. At another desk, Cecil's eyes narrowed. The word King Tyr flashed in her mind whenever she looked at Godfrey. Even if it was just a rumor, why had it come from the lips of the woman who assessed summons upon awakening? She had to dig deeper. As the school's news writer, this story was too juicy to ignore. If the rumor was wrong, Godfrey would be ruined. But if it was true, she'd expose the biggest secret Manhattan's staff was hiding. Not that she cared about him, whether he was crushed or not was irrelevant. Just then Snow strode into the classroom with his lackeys, his expression shifting when he saw Isolde leaning casually on Godfrey's desk. Manhattan's queen. He clenched his fist. How could she humiliate the entire school by leaving her seat to stand by the desk of a humanoid summoner? Teacher Edwin walked in right after and stood at the lectern. "Apologies, I spilled coffee on my shirt. That's why I'm 20 minutes late." His tone was flat as he dramatically cleared his throat and flicked open his notes. "With the competition around the corner, the one that will decide your points and possibly the next valedictorian, all rests on your summons. Today's topic: innate and adaptive skills." He paused, scanning the room. "I'll focus on adaptive skills, since innate ones are fixed from the moment your summon manifests." Godfrey zoned out, as did his partner in crime, Isolde. Later, Godfrey walked into the cafeteria, side by side, with Isolde, his hands buried in his pockets. She ordered chocolate cake for both of them, along with a few extras, and they carried the tray to a corner table. "You've been to a dungeon, haven't you?" Godfrey asked once they sat. Isolde lifted an eyebrow. "What makes you say that?" "The moment I saw Snow, you and Dale, I understood what set you apart from the rest. You faced life and death battles, you forged stronger bonds with your summons." Isolde took a small bite of her cake, savoring the sweetness before answering. "You're saying you understand why people like us look down on others, like they're insignificant." "The difference was obvious the moment I stepped in," Godfrey replied. "It's like a fully grown dog against a puppy, by the way." "I've been meaning to ask the Wyvern. Isn't your only summon, is it?" "Oh." Isolde stopped eating. "And what makes you think that?" "Wyverns can't cut a summoner's bond with their summon, or banish the mana that strengthens the summoner's body. You'd have to be incredibly strong with such a summon." "I'm an summoner," she said simply. Godfrey's pupils shrank. "What, you lost your courage?" she teased. Godfrey leaned back, eyes burning with determination. Once he opened the second door. "I'm still coming for the valedictorian." His declaration echoed across the cafeteria, just as a strange silence fell. Turning his head, he saw a silver-haired handsome boy enter with a dark-haired Asian student at his side. "It's Godfrey Insane. He says that on the very day of this semester, Manhattan's king decides to visit the cafeteria." A student whispered in disbelief. Godfrey's eyes met John's, and in an instant, it felt as though he were an ant staring up at an elephant. The sheer pressure the boy gave off by just standing there was overwhelming, an intimidating presence that bent the atmosphere itself. No one dared meet John's gaze directly. He was the kind of person who made people lower their eyes instinctively, as though looking at him too long was an offense. John gave a soft nod at Isolde, his eyes sliding past Godfrey as if he didn't exist, and then walked straight towards Snow with the Asian boy beside him. "Care to talk?" John asked, his tone even, but carrying an unshakable weight. For the first time, Godfrey watched the proud Snow rise from his seat without his usual smirk, pride, or nonchalance. His face was serious. "Where?" Snow asked. "He'll show you," John replied, turning on his heel, without sparing anyone else a glance. Dale froze for a second, expecting the king would at least acknowledge him. But John didn't even spare him a look. The cafeteria buzzed. Everyone knew what John's presence meant. It wasn't just about the Nexus Club. This was about grooming. Everyone whispered that Snow might be chosen groomed to become the next Manhattan king once he advanced into junior year. That's someone worthy of a King Tyr. And yet he isn't even a Lord Tyr. Do you see the difference? Godfrey Daniels, Cecil thought, her eyes darting toward Godfrey. She caught his gaze, and he raised an eyebrow at her, puzzled at the look she gave him. "That's Manhattan's king?" Godfrey asked Isolde, keeping his voice low. She nodded twice. "He is. Quite strong with a summon that gives him an incredible advantage. When he was just a sophomore, he hospitalized 70% of his classmates." What Godfrey's eyes narrowed in disbelief. "Forget about him. I've got a problem," Isolde said, suddenly catching his attention. Godfrey blinked. What could possibly be a problem for a 16-year-old Lord Tyr summoner? "I've been exercising at the school's field every morning for a week now, and I do not like the way Dale stares at me. It's best if you join me tomorrow morning. I need protection." Her ridiculous excuse made Godfrey roll his eyes. And you need to exercise. Summoners with good physiques always have the edge. The way I see it, him helping you, she added with a sly smile. Godfrey scoffed. I thought you weren't staying in the dormitories. Well, the headmaster couldn't leave his precious student outside the academy grounds for too long, not with news of dungeons and cane fanatics on the rise, Isude replied smoothly. Come on, it's a win-win. You can't say no. I'll be there. What time? 4 a.m. Godfrey accepted, knowing full well it was just an excuse to have a training partner. Still, it would give him the chance to learn more about Lord-tier summoners. But her words lingered with him. 2 summoners had changed the world forever. Not just cities or regions, the entire world. The first was Adam, the very first summoner. His summon could clear a red gate in minutes, what took others weeks or months. Worse, it could split itself into many, clearing multiple dungeons at once. It rode the clouds, crushed mountains with its staff, mimicked other summons, and wielded their innate and adaptive skills. It was a monster beyond monsters. The second was Cain, a man from Patmos. Years after Adam vanished, Cain rose with a twisted desire to become God. When the dungeons first appeared, the world entered the 5 years of great despair. 2 billion lives were lost. Cities crumbled. Continents bled as wastelands spread due to nuclear warheads. Cain brought the second calamity, Blood March. He slaughtered millions who refused to kneel, building a fanatical army. Cities either bowed and worshipped him, or drowned in their own blood. Like Adam, Cain was unstoppable. Even nuclear strikes couldn't bring down his summon. For 10 long years he reigned as an untouchable tyrant, until finally the 7 great cities united to defeat him, Manhattan among them. Technically New Manhattan, since the original was destroyed a century ago. The next morning, when the fog still blanketed the campus field, Godfrey found Isolde waiting on a bench. She wore a grey hoodie, grey leggings and white sneakers. Isolde, he called as he approached. She didn't react. He said her name again, a little louder. Still nothing. Finally, walking right in front of her, he noticed the earpods tucked in her ears. Her eyes widened when she saw him, so she removed them. What were you listening to? Godfrey asked, crossing his arms. Shooting Star. Don't you know her? Just Chase is a famous old-time singer. I got to know about her from my mom. She placed one earpod into his left ear, and at once the melody flowed into him. His eyes narrowed. The voice was captivating, soothing, and melancholic at once. While basking in the song, they began jogging together. Godfrey didn't spot Dale, but he already knew the boy wouldn't appear. He wasn't a threat to Isolde. When the song ended, it was as if the softer part of Isolde faded with it. Her expression sharpened. I want to see how strong you've grown, she said suddenly, picking up her pace. Godfrey gritted his teeth and followed, pushing harder. He gained ground, but never closed the gap. Isolde's strides remained steady, her breathing light, while his speed tore at his lungs and made the fog vaporize against his skin. For an hour he pushed himself to the edge, until finally he collapsed onto the grass, panting like a beast that had just outrun death. Isolde stood above him, barely winded. A light sheen of sweat glistened on her forehead, but her breathing was even. Contrast, Godfrey's shirt clung to him, soaked through with sweat. Unfortunately, their first class that day was training back on the same field. Godfrey's thighs still screamed from earlier. Had he known, he might have gone to the nurse. Isolde, Snow and Dale led the front, while Godfrey trailed behind the rest, his legs trembling so violently he nearly collapsed multiple times. Wow, just look at him. Siegfried mocked loudly. You should have stayed home, Godfrey. This is pitiful. Their jeers didn't stop even after everyone else had finished and collapsed onto the grass. Godfrey kept running. You can make it, Dale shouted mockingly, drawing laughter from the group. But Isolde didn't laugh. She stood silently at the track's edge, her eyes following him. When Godfrey finally completed his laps, collapsing to his knees, she rushed forward with a bottle of water. Course he needs a woman to. Shut it, Siegfried, the instructor snapped, cutting him off. He turned to the others, his voice cold. While he trained non-stop in the early hours of the morning, you all slept. Yet he still finished the task that left you sprawled on the ground, like you'd achieved something. You're the ones making a mockery of yourselves. Dale's face twisted, heat rushing to his cheeks. He had just been publicly shamed, and worse, shamed because of Godfrey. Because of trash. Why hadn't Godfrey said anything? Was his silence deliberate to make fools out of them all? Fury twisted inside him. With a roar, Dale slammed his fist into the ground, shattering it. His hand sank deep into the earth, as dust and soil sprayed outward.